All right, so let's just quickly move on to what we are doing today. So today we have a lot to cover. We have things to look at in JavaScript today. So I promised us we're going to start working on the library application we looked at last week. Last week we looked at let me see, let me run that, and I think I have it open somewhere. So let me bring this to the window so you can see. Oh, okay, somebody's asking for the screenshot. Don't worry, I'll send it. I'll send the screenshot. But let's just talk about this first. All right, so look at the library application that we have on the screen right now. So it's just a mini application to demo JavaScript, right? So for example, the idea is that when you're reading, when you're studying, you have a place where you can keep track of your books, the books that you're studying, right? So we'll call it we're calling it my book library. So if I put in, let's give it a title. This is the title of the book, whatever the title is. And then you click on submit, right? Or save. You can see that icon there. It's just a font awesome icon. You can, instead of putting a text, I decided to use a floppy disk icon just to denote saving, right? So you can see there is, now that has disappeared. That is an alert. It stays for like 3 seconds and it goes away. Then you can see we've added the book to our library. Let me refresh this page and see. Yes, so you can see the book or the entry has been persisted in our local storage. I mentioned last week that all browsers or latest browsers have APIs for storing data, on the browser itself. So it's called local storage. So to demonstrate, how to save, how to delete, and how to update items, we'll be using local storage for something like this. A production application should not store data, well, should not store the main data on the local storage. You can store metadata, you can store, data about the person or session data on local storage or even session storage, right? But the main data about your products, for example, details about your customers, should never be stored on the browser. It can be hacked. It can be, it can be hacked. But for something like this, we're not storing anything sensitive. We are just storing, this on local storage. So you can add more books. This is another book title, and you can even hit enter. So we're able to, you can see without clicking this, I'm hitting enter on my keyboard. We're able to do that because this is a form, right? In HTML, we have forms. And when you have a button attached to a form and you click or you hit the enter key on your keyboard, it submits. That button is activated by default. So it tries to submit the form, right? And there are events that are going on behind the scene, which we'll still talk about today. As this button, or as you click on this button, it gets the content of what is here and then adds it to this particular list, or I'm calling this entry container. So there's a container here which we'll still look at as we continue. So now two of the functions are working. I've completed 2 of the functions. This one is to mark this book as done or completed. So, but this functionality is not working yet. You can see nothing is happening as I'm clicking on it. But as I click on edit, I believe edit should be working, or delete. So delete is work. It says book deleted. Let me refresh my page again. You can see just one book is remaining because local storage has been implemented. And we'll still look at all that. I can delete this as well. See, book deleted again. If I try to submit a book without putting in any text, I should tell my user that, something is wrong, please supply a text, right? Just normal alerts. So if I click on this, look at the alerts, you can see the color I'm using this time around, like a warning kind of color, right? So just to signify that, something is wrong somewhere. So then take an action. Enter book title. So let me say the book of the Lord. Right? That's another title. And I save. Now let's do something. If I refresh this page, what will happen? Let's see. So this is just one book because I've deleted. I've deleted. And if you clear all actually clears the entire database. Now let me right click on this. Let's see your local storage. And that's why you don't store things on local storage. So you can view the content of your local storage. If you are using Chrome, for Chrome you go to applications, right? Under applications, by the left hand side, you see applications, storage, background services, frames, and all that. Now come to the storage section, you see local storage. You see session storage. Session is when you are browsing, right? For example, you log on to Facebook. Have you wondered why when next you come to that same Facebook page on that same browser, Facebook doesn't prompt you to log in again? It's just to give you a good user experience. You don't want to be coming to the same browser every time and Facebook is asking you to log in, except they've suspected irregularities somewhere. Maybe somebody has logged into your account from another browser and they're keeping track of your what is it again? Your browser. There's a technical term I'm trying to, is it user agent or something? Anyways, they are keeping track of your browser, the IP address, everything, just to make sure that you are the right person or you are who you are, right? If you say you are Ojo, and you are logging into Facebook from the location, from the particular IP address, then you should be that person. So, but if the same Ojo with the same ID or same email address is logging in from Russia, then they might want to log you out and maybe ask you to reset your password, or you discover that when next you go to that same page, then you are logged out, or you received an email telling you that something has happened to your account and maybe reset your password and all that. So that's session storage. So you can save sessions on your browser, and of course sessions can be saved in the database as well. So as much as possible, don't expose sensitive data. Don't store any sensitive data on your browser. But we're dealing with, now there's also cookies. Cookies is also very good. They use cookies to keep track of you. If I open, okay, for this particular domain, do I have any cookies? It's empty. But let's open a page. Let me see. Is Mozilla tracking me? Let me see this one. Let me view. Nope, not page source. Inspect. Go to applications. Go to cookies. Ooh, you can see. So they store, websites store cookies. That's why I don't know if you know about GDPR. I think it's called General Data Protection or something that was enacted by European Union. So they want all website owners to let you know what data they are tracking. So that's why when you get to a new website, they will tell you, okay, we are keeping track of this in using cookies. We want to let you know these are the things we are collecting. Do you accept this or not, right? So if you accept, then they will start storing those cookies on your browser, just to learn your browsing history. They use cookies to track what you are browsing, what you are searching online, and things like that. So these are, so but we're looking at local storage now. If you go to local storage, and no, not for this domain, but for this particular domain, go to local storage. If I double click on this, now you can see there's a list. I've created a list containing an array of objects. So if I select, as I've selected it, look at the objects. So this list has just one item. The first item, remember we said last week that an array has index or begins with an index 0, right? So you can see this is the index here, 0, with this particular object or item. It's actually a JavaScript object, but it has actually been stringified to where it's actually a JavaScript object, but it's also similar to a JSON. But anyways, so this is the content. ID is this. Look at, see the book of the Lord, what we stored in the browser. So this local storage helps us to persist our data. If I refresh this page, see, this is still here. So this is still here. But if I delete or clear my local storage, let's delete this and refresh this page, what happens? Oh, you can see nothing is there, it's gone, because it cannot find, it's trying to pull that item from the local storage. So this is what we want to try to build today. Let's see how far we can go. So the UI is already available on my GitHub. So any updates I'm making to this, I'm going to push it there so that you have access to the UI for your own demo as well. So let's move on to week 8. I have my week 8 folder. I'm going to copy, let me copy this one because I've updated it. This is the HTML. Let's move it down here. No, not move. Let me just copy the content. Starter, paste, CSS, copy, come here, paste, delete all this. All right, let's delete them. So, all right, so let's now talk about forms and document object model. What is DOM? What is HTML DOM, right? So if you go to where is our documentation? So to DOM, so document object model is the data representation of the objects that comprise the structure and the content of a document on the web. So just consider, let me open up a particular diagram. I'm trying to, so this is your document or your DOM tree. So at the root of the tree, you have an object called document. Actually, there's a window above this. There's a window, there's a document. And then the root element is actually your HTML tag. That HTML element is the root element of every document. So every web page you see, let's go back here. Every web page you see, let's come here, close all. So open the one in the starter. So every web page you see, there's a tree, there's a document tree represented on the browser, right? So HTML here is the root, is this particular root element here. See, HTML. Then under HTML, we have head, we have body. Logically, under HTML, we have head, and then we have, look at, let me format this. So under HTML, so we have head and what? You can see how this head and body, this section is being housed by what? HTML. So HTML is the root element, and then we have, head, body under HTML. Under head, we have title. Under body, we have all other elements, all the elements you can add to your web page. They will be children of what? Of body, right? And then you can have sub children, and each one can have a text. Maybe this element could be a div with further children. It could be an article, it could be a section. Everything that you add to your body, there will be children under the body, under this tree. There will be children to the body element. So down to the leaf. So the last element is called a leaf element, because just look at a tree. A tree has a root, the trunk or the body. There are branches. Then after branches, you now get to the leaf. So the leaf should be the last section of every tree. So every last section of an HTML tree that does not have children is more like a leaf, right? So you can see this is a text element. This is another text element. This could be a paragraph, it could be another a tag, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that is the HTML DOM. Now, so JavaScript now has APIs for traversing or going through this tree of elements, right? So that's the DOM, the DOM APIs. So let's go back to our documentation again. So for example, there are functions for querying a particular element. If I want to select all the p tags, this is the meaning: query selector all. I'm selecting all the p elements, in that particular page. So different functions for selecting, for working with DOM or your HTML DOM, HTML elements from within your JavaScript. So now with that knowledge, let's look at something. Let's come back to our demo, JS demo. Let's clear all this, right? So in the body section, let's add a form. So it doesn't have an action. Let's just add an input element. Let's do input. Let's do text. So it should be self-closing. I can give it an ID if I wish. Let's say name. I can give it a class. Let's say text. Or let's just give it whatever input name. Let's say input name, right? So if we view this on the browser, let's see. So this is how you design a form. So all your form elements must come under a form element, right? For you to be able to interact with your form. And I said when you have a button is another input element. So it's of type button. We can even do of type submit. There are different types. So if you do type submit and you try to submit, this is what submits this particular form, right? Let's name it save or submit. So we have an input element for taking user input. You can also have checkbox. You can have, there are different, this is a checkbox element. This is input. This is a date input, right? So different input elements that you can use to build your form. So let's just view this on the browser. Let's see what we get. Open with live server. So look at that date input. You can see we didn't have to create all this from scratch, right? It's already built for us. So once you put, let's come back here. Once you do input type date, it's going to give you the default date picker. the default date picker. Of course, the view might be different depending on the browser. Some browsers may display this differently, right? So this is the button submit. This is the checkbox that we added. Let's just give it some, let's just do break. We're not doing CSS, right? So let's just do break. Let's copy this. We're not doing anything fanciful. We're just learning. We're learning DOM. So look at this. Or let me put them side by side. Close this. It's my HTML. So let's name this appropriately. Let's say HTML DOM. So you can see, so this is a text. I can give it a label. Let's say your name. In fact, let's just put this in a div. Again, we are not doing anything fancy here. Name. So let's cut this out. So if I use a div, I don't need the break again. Div is already a block level element, remember. So let me just put name. Let's do 2 of this. Let's say put this in a div as well. Div select option, whatever you want to call it. We're just testing. So I can put a break here in that case. We're not designing. So your date, where's the date? Checkbox. Okay, this date should not be there. So bring this out. So another div again. Put your date here. We can say date of birth or something. Date of birth. Then submit. Let's just put a paragraph here. So now look at this simple form. So we have, you can supply your name. You can select a checkbox. There are also radio buttons. This is a date picker. So you can pick, you can try with different form elements. Again, once you add them, you wrap all of them with a form element, right? You can see there are some attributes on this form element called action. This action is when you let me see. So when you say submit this form, right? What action are you trying to take? What action do you want to perform? Do you want to submit this form into a database? In that case, there should be another maybe an endpoint, an API endpoint that you can pass here. So I can just do something like this here, maybe API endpoints, right? Endpoints. Well, let me just do URL, which covers for everything. Let me just do URL. So this URL is the destination where you are sending, where you are submitting this form, right? There are other properties, other attributes. You can do method. There's a method attribute. So there are 3 actually. There's dialog, get, and post. So there is post. Post is Post is mainly used when you want to submit the form into a database and you don't want the client, the user agent, the browser, or the users to see the content of what you are posting. Imagine you want to buy something on Amazon or on Jumia, and at the top of the what is it, the address bar, you are seeing everything you've supplied, your credit card detail, your password, and all that. So that's the difference between the post and the get, right? So get, there's something called HTTP verbs. So yeah, there is get, there is post, there is delete, there is cookie, there is put. Yeah, there is put. HTTP verbs. So, but for HTML, you only have for get and post, and I think dialog, as we just saw. So for get meaning that you want to fetch data from somewhere, and you can afford you can afford your, what is it now? Your users can see the content of what you are fetching. If we do get, for example, let's try to refresh this. Let me bring this out. Let me open it bigger so we can see. Copy this, come here, paste. So let's put in this, select a date, and try to submit. You can see. So the form is trying to submit. Look at the address bar. Look at this URL question mark, right? Because of this action, this is the action we are taking. We are saying submit this form to this particular URL, this endpoint, using the get method. You can see get method, it says corresponds to the HTTP get method. Form data are appended to the action attribute URI with a question as separator, which is what we just saw here. Look at, by default, there's a question mark placed here, right? So if it is fully implemented, you start seeing the attributes. This name, let's give it a name, input type, because you need the name for that. Name is another attribute. Let's name it first name. Let's call this first name. So let's name it first name, first underscore name. We can give our ID as first underscore name. In this case, we really do not need our ID here right now, but it may be useful for us when we are interacting with it from JavaScript, interacting with the DOM tree. So this one, the name attribute for this one is, let's say, what are we trying to do here? Let's give it some values. Select checkbox. Let's say let's just say options. Let's call it options. Let's call this one yellow and blue, because these are options. So select options, so we can say yellow or blue, right? So let's give it name options. This is also options. Where's the other one? Let's bring this down so we can see clearly. So select option blue, name is options, this is also options, and I believe, okay, you can just select this. All right, so that's the name attribute, and of course date. Let's give it date of birth, or DOB, right? And let's go back again. Let's submit the form again. Okay, add this. So look at the address bar. Look at the address bar. It says slash URL question mark. If you can see my address bar, question mark first name equals Ade and options equals on. Options equals on. I will explain that. And DOB equals 2024-11-14. So now what just happened here? Again, you can see how the browser is exposing the content of your form at this point. So if you are submitting something sensitive, you don't use the get HTTP method. You don't use get. You use post. Take note, you use post, right? Because your browser will see everything that you are trying to send to the server using get, or you're trying to get from the server, using the get HTTP verb. So now what just happened here? So, and from the explanation we saw the other time, it says that when you submit to this URL with the get method, then the browser appends a question mark to the end of that URL, right? And then all the individual children or form elements are displayed. So the first form element is first name, coming from this name attribute. Take note, not even this ID is coming from this name attribute, right? So the ID can be different. In fact, I can even remove this ID from here. Nothing will happen. I don't need this ID to interact to submit the form, but I may need the ID when I'm interacting with the DOM tree if I choose to do so. So this first name you are seeing on this browser here is coming from this attribute name, first name attribute set to, or this name attribute set to first name. So, and then it gets the value automatically. Look at the value. Ade. Remember we entered Ade as the content of that text box. Then there is an AND keyword. So it now joins it with the next, somebody is annotating again. Please don't annotate. So it joins it with the next child element with the name options. Look at options. What's the next element that has options as name? Name options, right? In fact, the next one is also options. But look at, it says equal to on and options equal to on. On is the state of that checkbox. So a checkbox is either on or off. It's either true or false. It's either 0 or 1. You understand? So if it is checked, let's go back here. You can see it still retains the content. If it is checked, let me check off this one and submit the form again. You see, Ade, in fact, the other one is not even shown because it is off. So we think by default, the first checkbox is going to be null, right? While the other checkbox has a value of on because it is checked. If it is checked, it means that it is on. And then look at the date. It's 11/14/2024. Let's submit again. You see, and DOB, where is DOB coming from? Again, the name of this date field, DOB. The name of this date field is the DOB here. DOB equals, what is the value? The content of our date field here. So whatever the content is will be assigned to that name field. So it is this name attributes you now use on the server side. So assuming this is a post, where this is not a post, but assuming it is a post, it's all these name attributes, first underscore name, options, DOB, that will be sent to the server side for them to now read out the content of your request. This is called a request. There's a request object being sent to the server somewhere. So your implementation, your backend implementation now traverses or reads or goes through that particular request object and extracts out the individual values. So I'm just on a higher level. That's what happens in the back end, which we're not, working on right now. So This is a form, right? So now how do you, let's quickly talk about this 304. I really want us to start working on that project, but we have to go through this first to have basic understanding. So how do we collect these form details from our JavaScript, right? So in our JavaScript, let's come here. There are two ways. Again, you can put your script here directly, or you can create this within the head section. But the best practice is to do your JavaScript at the end, making it the last item in your body. So now with this knowledge, let's now go back to, let me bring back the ID. So because we need our JavaScript to be able to interact, because the JavaScript is not running, this JavaScript that I want to write is not running on the back end. So that's why you need the ID, or the things that are present on the browser, on the client, to be able to interact with your form elements. So let's give it an ID of name as well, or first name as well. So they do not have to match, but I'm just naming it logically. This field is a first name field, so I'm just naming the ID as well as first name. Let's duplicate this. Let's do last name. So then you have to rename this as what? Last name, and then last name as well. Let's change this input name first. Let's rename this as, since there are different fields, those are my CSS classes. So now we have this. How do we interact with this? How do we interact with the DOM tree? Remember we said DOM, DOM means document object model. So JavaScript has APIs for interacting with all those elements we just saw now on your web. Any element at all the elements you can think of on your web page, JavaScript has a way to interact with them, and that is the document, the DOM APIs. So how do we do that? So let's create let's create our JavaScript externally. Let's I'm working from the starter folder, right? Let's call it main.js. It can be anything, it can be app.js, it can be anything. So let's add our JavaScript to our HTML. Remember, no, not this one. Here, we're here. So I said you can either add your JavaScript inside your head, in between your head section, or inside your body, right? Now, why do you need to do that? Because when your page loads, right, your page tries to load the JavaScript as well. So imagine having a JavaScript at the head section, and remember we talked about how the rendering engine or the JavaScript engine interprets your JavaScript from top to bottom. From line 1, it interprets line 1, interprets line 2, interprets line 3, line 4, line 5. And assuming we have a JavaScript script, let's do script. So assuming we have JavaScript source here, now it gets to line 6, and you are trying to read or perform an action that blocks the event, or that blocks the current thread, or that takes long to run. Then you discover that the page would take a while to load, right? So that's why the best practice is move your JavaScript, right? From, of course, something like this, you won't really notice anything because we're not really doing any time-consuming activity here. So, but the best practice is move your JavaScript to the last section, so that your page, as JavaScript is in tab, as your page is being rendered, line by line, it goes on, it renders your page before loading the JavaScript. And of course, since this happens behind the scene, your customer or the user will not really know that something is happening behind the scene. Already the form has been displayed. so they can see the form. They can even start interacting with the form. Meanwhile, this is also still loading in the background. So yeah, now let's insert. This is how to insert your JavaScript. Again, you can write all your JavaScript here. In fact, let's even do that. So the first thing is, how do we want to get the content of this first name, right? With an ID. And if you go to the HTML the JavaScript documentation, there is an object called document. Remember document? See, document. It says document. Oh, it's not giving us documentation. Anyways, let's go back to our tree. See, document is here. There's also a window above this document. So anytime you want to interact with all these elements, all these children, it could be body, it could be anchor tag, it could be another div, it could be a paragraph, it could be another list or h1. All those elements are still children to this document object. So you start by doing document dot, right? Now they are now different. So document now exposes different functions or methods. So there's one called get animations. You can see, because I typed get. If you just do dots, there are so many attributes and properties. See, base URI, body, directly targeting the body element. You can see children, you can see cookie, different things. You can see forms, first element child, get element by class name, get root. So many attributes of the document element. So, but what we want to do, we want to get the content of this form element. We use one called get element by. See, get element by. So there's get element by ID, get element by class name, get element by name. I can also use the name, get element by tag name, get element by tag name NS. So you can also do, there's another one called query. See, query selector. You can use query. So when you're using query, then that means you want to get that element using the CSS classes. For example, remember I added for this first child element, first name, there's a CSS class called first, called input name first, right? So if I want to get the content of this element using this class, then I'll use the method, the one called query selector. See, query selector. But let's start by doing get element by what? By ID. So now, what is the ID? We have to let JavaScript should know the ID what we are trying to reference, we're trying to get access to, right? So come back to your form again. What is the ID here? The ID is what? First name, right? So which means, and it's a string element. So it's a string attribute rather, or string value. So you must put it in quotes. Get element by first name. Now, before we even do the value, before we do the get the value, let's just echo this out first. Let's do log, console log. Let's assign this. We've not assigned this to a variable. Let's do const first name equals. So remember, we've talked about how to create variables, how to assign values to variable. The right hand side is we are getting this particular element, this input element that we've labeled as first name. Remember, it is not this label we are targeting, it is this input element we are targeting here. This is just a label. It means JavaScript is not even saying, it means nothing to JavaScript. If we want to make use of a label, we can actually do a label tag. There's also a label tag, right? Let me just quickly demo that here. put a label here, cut this, come here, and put it. See this for attribute is asking, this label is for what? Remember the ID, put the ID here. Put the ID here. So I'll demonstrate the difference between this line 13 and line 14. You can see no difference. First name, last name, right? Now look at something. I'll still come back to this. So look at, if I click on first name label, look at, as I click on first name, this particular input element gains focus. My cursor goes here directly. Look at, let me click away again. See, the cursor is not here. But if I click on this label, first name, what did you notice? This child, this text input, this text field gains focus automatically because we've applied the label tag to it. That's just the function. So if you put a label tag and you put the for, this for, I'm telling this, I'm saying this label first name is for a particular field with an ID of first name. So JavaScript or HTML will look around and say, okay, which ID or which field has an ID of first name here? Only this one matches. So when you click on it, it highlights or it gains focus. But now let's click on this. Oh, look at, I'm clicking on last name. Nothing is happening. See? So these are just little things to introduce or to make browsing experience, good, or user experience good for your users, right? So I can just click on this. This is highlighted and I start typing, right? But clicking on this goes nowhere, takes me nowhere because I've not applied the label tag to this particular form input or text field. This text field, input field. So now let's come back to our JavaScript. So what we have done here is that using the ID, we said get element by ID. Using the ID, which is still first name, we want to get this document. We want to get this field, this input field, which is also a child of the document object. So now we are assigning it to a variable. This is just assignment operation. We are assigning it to a variable so that we can hold it somewhere, and then we can now use it anywhere within our source code. So this place now, I want to log out the first name. Let's just log out. We've not even gotten the value, but let's see what this gives us. So let's inspect, go to inspect. This time around, when you're working with JavaScript, you go to your console. Go to your console, right? Now, so with our form inputs, let's come back here again. Let's give it a name. We want to make sure that when we submit this element, or let's give it an ID. Let's say, what should we name this form? Let's say student data or something. So the same way you are getting, remember this is an ID, we can use this same ID to get the form element. Now this, let me duplicate this. Let's say form element by what? What is the ID of this form? Student data, right? Yeah, somebody says check student spelling. Okay, thank you. Student data, it has to match. So let's do this here. So line 26, we've used the get element by ID to get the form element, right? So if I submit, we can add event. We can say add or dot add event listener, right? So the event is that different types of events. We've not really had time to discuss in detail different types of events that you can perform on your form. So there is this submit action, right? The type of event is submit. right? And then it takes a callback function. So that means when you submit a button, what should happen, right? But first and foremost, let's add an event object here. I will explain all this. Let's prevent, so e dot prevent default. So what we are doing here is that, remember, there is every HTML object has a default action that applies to it. For example, a form element with a submit button is submitted when you click on that button, right? But this time around, we don't want to submit this form immediately. We want to hold this form. Remember when we submitted it, it went to this URL action. But now we don't want it to move. We are not submitting this form to any URL, right? So what we want, in fact, we can even take away all this right now. So what we want to do is to hold this form from being submitted, and then we want to view the content of what we have here. So that is, here we are preventing default. So in this place, we can now log out. So prevent default, then let's log out the content of our first name. So what is the E? This E is the event object. The E is the event object. Remember I said this is, we're saying add event listener to this form element, right? So the E that we are passing here, it can be anything. It can be a name. Just make sure that whatever you pass here as the field or the form variable, the form form parameter is the same thing we are using here. I can even do event here, but make sure you're also calling this as event. So what I'm doing here is that I'm preventing the default behavior of this form. I don't want it to be submitted immediately. What I want to do is that once I try to submit, because again, there's a submit button. So once I click on this, it tries to submit the form, but then it prevents it from going to an action and then now displays other things or continues running other parts of the form. So let's see. First name is, let's say, James. Now the action is not yet performed, right? If I click on this, let me see, first name, let's get value as well. James logs, hold on, where is my submit? Document log element by ID, student data. I hope this is correct. Student data. Use an underscore instead. So I'm having James. Hope I'm collecting first name here. Giving me some errors. What's going on? Source attribute element is empty. Okay. James, let's see. Yeah, so that was the problem. So it was saying, remember at this point, look at, see, source is empty here. So JavaScript is expecting is expecting the reference to a particular source. Remember, we wanted to create, in fact, we've created an external JS, but we are doing it internally at this point. So assuming we have all this in an external file, we'll just reference the file at this point. So that was the issue. So this is how to debug. So I saw the error somewhere. It says source attribute for this is empty. So I just simply remove it. Since we're not targeting an external JavaScript file, you don't need to add that there. So now what have we done here? So James, but let's do second name, James Badmus. Let's submit. Definitely we are not getting James because we don't have a reference for last name yet. So just duplicate this, copy, duplicate. This is last name. But what is the ID of last name? Come back. What is the ID? Obviously, it should be what? Last name as well. Remember, this is the field. This is the line 15. Label is last name. This is the input field, and the ID is what? Last name. So with the ID of last name here, last name, and I can console log last name as well. So let's submit. We can see James Badmore. So at this point, so it simply means that once this form is submitted, we have access to, in fact, we have access to to first name and last name. We can then start performing actions inside this function, this event. For example, I might want to submit the form to a database. I might want to get perform further actions on this particular element. All right, so that's an example of using your DOM class or DOM objects to traverse your HTML tree to extract details out of it. Now I wanted to even print out the object itself, if not even the value. So let's do print out only first name. Let's see what will happen. Let's submit. Let me comment this out. Let's submit. Now you can see it's giving you the entire object, the input object. You can see the beauty of JavaScript. It's telling me I'm printing first name. See, document.getElement by ID. I'm getting the entire element from the HTML, this text box. Look at this. Where is it again? This whole input field. Let me bring it down here so you can see clearly. So this whole input field. So this is what getElement by ID does by default. GetElement by ID gets that object itself, right? Let's do it again. Submit, and you can see all the properties of that object. Look at, if you expand this, you can see accept, access key, align, alt, down, so many properties, attributes. The name is first name, as we have defined here. Name equals first name. So you can use your DOM object to manipulate all the tags, all the HTML tags on your window, on your page. Assuming you want to dynamically change the name attribute from first name to something else, we have access to it. See, we have access to it. Assuming you want to, we can know the number of child element count is 0. There are no children to this element. We'll talk about that. There is client width, it's 185. There is so many attributes, so many. See, the form ID, the form that produced this particular element, it's giving it to us as well with the ID student_data. Form enc type, so many attributes that can manipulate within your. There's something called outer HTML. See, there's also inner HTML. If you see, Can I get inner HTML? Let's do, anyways, when we get there, we'll demonstrate that. So inner HTML gives you all the, assuming I'm using I'm using JavaScript to get this attribute, this tag. JavaScript gets all this as tag, right? As object. But then everything inside is called the inner HTML. You can also get the inner HTML of this particular div element, meaning all the content and all the HTML objects will be returned to you as the inner HTML, right? There's placeholder text. Assuming I had a placeholder, for example, input type, you can add placeholder to your input just to inform your user, enter your name, right? If I clear my form, if I take away James here, you will see, enter your name. That's placeholder. It's called placeholder, right? So that is placeholder. So your DOM, you can do so many things. Yeah, you can do so many things, with JavaScript manipulating your DOM tree. So I just wanted to show that to you. But in this case, we can, since we want to get the value, just one part of that whole object. Let's come back to James again. So we just want to get just one part of it, which is, where can we see James? James. I think should be the text. Is it a text attribute? James should be somewhere here. Yeah, I can see value. See, value is what? James. So with this first name, I can just say dot what? Dot value. So dot value will return James to us. So if I submit again, you see we're only returning James at this point because James is one of the value. This value here is one of the properties or attributes of this input element called first name. So take note of that. So again, there are different ways of interacting with this, with HTML, and you can also use CSS. Yeah, let's demonstrate that. There's a class name. We'll give it a class name called input name first, right? Let's use class name to demonstrate that now. So use the query. You now use query selector. Let's say first name const first name 2 equals document. Again, remember everything are children to what? To document. See, everything, they are all children to document. So you say document dot what? Query selector. So it says query selector returns the first element that is a descendant of a node that matches the selector. Remember we said we use selectors to pick out CSS classes. So in JavaScript, you use the query selector to do that. There's also query selector all. If you do query selector all of a particular element, it will select all the elements as children, or that are children to that particular element. So if we do query selector all of, let's say, assuming there's a class name here, and we do query selector all of a class name for this form, it's going to select all the HTML elements under this form element. But let's just get that of the first name, query selector, QU, if I can spell, query selector, and then you give it the class name. Remember CSS, every class name starts with a dot, right? So dot, the value of the class name. Take note, when you're using query selector, you must select it as if it's actually your CSS class in a CSS file. So JavaScript expects this to be a CSS class using the dot notation. But remember when we did get element by ID, we didn't have to put dots here for student or for first name or for last name. Putting dots here will not even work because number one, there is no ID named dot first name here, and which would be a typo. It might even mess with the JavaScript engine, as in putting a dot notation here. It may not, it's not so obvious here, but when you are coding, something could go wrong. So you don't start a variable name with dot. But in CSS, it's allowed. CSS classes begin with dots, right? So you do dot the name of the class. And what is the name? Input first name. Remember, we have it here. Class is what? It's called input first name. Don't be confused. At this point, there is no dot here. In the HTML, there is no dot. But in your CSS, remember in CSS, we use dot notations for what? For classes. See dot, 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 and so on. And so on and so forth. So now let's see if this is going to work. Let's comment out for first name. Let's print out first name 2. First name 2. But this time around we're using query selector. So let's see. Are we still going to get James? Let's submit. Yes, we're still going to get James. See? So you can use query selector. Another person can use get element by ID. There's also get element by name, right? So meaning that you are using the name attribute of that field to get that element. So take note of that. So I just wanted to explain document object model and how it works from within your JavaScript. So take note of that. Now, what can we do today? Wow. But let's see. Let's go to our project. Let's start working on our project. So with this knowledge, we can, okay, I wanted to create, so we can move all this. Let's move all this to an external file. So if we move all this to an external file, clean up our file, take all this away. No, we're not taking this away, but we're referencing source main.js. Remember, we created it already. So put your JavaScript here. It's still going to work. Everything will still work perfectly, but we're just referencing an external JavaScript. So if I click submit, see, we're still getting James from this query selector. So that is how to do that. Now, so let's try to, even if it is delete, we can do, or add. Let's see. Let's go to our project. So index already. Let me close this. Close this. So let me run the index, the HTML first, so we know what we're working with. Somebody's asking, how do I enable the autocomplete for the dictionaries when typing on VS Code? It should come by default. That's Emmet. Emmet comes with VS Code by default. So, and again, VS Code is not really, when it comes to autocompletion, VS Code is not as robust as some other IDEs. I wrote a blog post on WebStorm. WebStorm is very good with autocompletion and things like that. So, but yeah, for VS Code, Emmet should be on your VS Code by default. So let's see. So let's run this JavaScript. We want to build. What if connecting with database, is it going to follow some process using DOM? So if you are connecting to database, the first thing you still need to do, you need to get all those form elements, just like as we did here. Get all your form elements, get your form contents, right? Or form attributes, or whatever you want to call them. And then you now send all that using the post method. There are different HTTP functions. There's Axios. There is You can use the simple fetch that comes with JavaScript. Fetch. Look at this fetch function. It says if you go to fetch, you go to MDN reference, open. So this is what you use. The fetch method of the window interface starts the process of fetching a resource from the network, returning a promise that is fulfilled once the response is available. So yeah, you can use fetch either to fetch or also to send a request to a server. So yeah, if you want to save to a database, you can use fetch or Axios. The popular one is Axios. When we start React and using framework, Axios is a popular one for doing what is it? So is it this Axios? Axios, yep, yeah, Axios HTTP. So this is it. So you do npm install and all that. Once you've done that, you have access to your Axios, you know, to send requests to the server. But we'll talk about all that when we start doing when we start talking about frameworks like Next.js and the likes. All right, so let's close this. So let's run this. Open with live server. I want to use Chrome. Let's use Chrome for this. Let me bring up Chrome. Okay, I even have it here already. Okay, so we have this UI. We're not talking about UI again, right? We've gone past that. We know how to do this, something simple as this. But is the functionality we want to work on now? This is just H1. This is input. This is a button. Remember everything we talked about? We are going to use them in this project. You put a text. You need to get the name. You click a button. You need to submit the form. There's a function to process. You do get element by ID. All that we're going to use in this project. So let's come back. Let's do let's put this side by side so we can see as the page is being refreshed. As the page is being refreshed. So our index, so this is the index. Let's check. So I've already linked to main.js. I hope this is the right one. All right, let's clear out all this. This is not the one. So let me just take this one back to the demo page. The demo, yeah. Let's put this one here as so that we can have it handy, or you may want to take a look at it after pushing this to GitHub. So let's leave it. This is just for demo. Let's close this out. Close this. Then, so this is a blank JavaScript object, JavaScript page. So the idea is that when we say book title, let me say the let's say how, and type how to know God, right? So the idea is that when you click submit or click on this button, we want to add it to our database. We want to I'm using the word database, not really where it's database, but it's actually local storage on the browser. So the idea is that it should display here with some other. Let me run the final one as well, so we'll have a benchmark. So index, run this, open with live server, bring this over. So bring this here. So let me clear everything first. So this is the final version. And when we are done with this, I'm going to push all this to GitHub so you can see the source code as well. So the idea is that when we say this, when we put a book title, this is the title of the book. I'll click submit, right? There is an alert here. The book title is here. There are action buttons. For example, I've finished reading the book, not yet functional. I can never give this to you as an assignment, which is going to be a very simple thing. Then edit. If I want to edit, if I want to delete, for example, if I made a mistake by, on the title and I want to edit this title, did you see what happened right now? What was here, this text is now, has been brought back to this input field. The save icon that was here has been changed to what? The edit icon. So you can see those little things. So I can now edit. I can say this is the title of the book, edited. So, and if I click on save, what did you notice? See, it has been edited back to save icon. There was an alert, and I can delete. I can clear my database. I can do anything I want to do. So, right. So add another book. This is another title of a book, and I click this. Another title of a book, and I click this. So like I said, it is being persisted on local storage. If I refresh, even if I close my browser, come back tomorrow again, it's still going to be here for us because it's being stored as local storage on the browser. So now I can delete, see, book deleted. I can delete, book deleted. I can even clear all. Once you clear all and you refresh, clear all clears everything from the database, so nothing is there. So this clear all shouldn't show here if the database is empty. So this is like a minor fix. Anyway, so that's what we want to do now. So let's come back. So this is blank, nothing is happening here. So the first thing we need to do, let's get all our elements, all our DOM elements. So main.js. So first and foremost, let's even look at what we are having here, the HTML. Let's examine the HTML. This is main. Yes, demo file is going to be available on GitHub. I'm going to push everything to GitHub. So this is main. Now look at this alert here. See, alert. Nothing is here, it's blank. The alert that we see here, look at, when I put in a book title, and I click this, see this alert, this object, is this paragraph tag with no text. So dynamically JavaScript is writing this alert to it, to this point. So that is the essence of understanding the DOM tree, the DOM document object model. You can traverse. I can traverse down and pick this element and append something to it, and then it's going to show up dynamically on your screen. This is just a container with h1 tag, my book library. Then this is the form element itself, form. I gave it a class name called library form. Then this another just a div element with an input of type text, as we have demoed before. ID, I'm giving a title, class name, title input, placeholder, as we have demoed just now. Enter the book title. See, enter the book title. It's placeholder. You cannot clear it off. It's placeholder. You can't. So it's supposed to give instruction to the user, right? Ideally, when you use a placeholder, you don't need a label. There's no need for a label. So that's why I didn't add any label here again. So this should be instructive enough for a user to know what to do. Enter book title. So enter the title of the book. And as you enter the title of the book, placeholder goes away, right? So that is the function of that. Then button type submit is of type submit, which is the only submit button inside this form element, meaning that when you click on this, it tries to submit this form. So that's of type submit. I give it an ID of button save, a class. There are two classes being applied. I think we can also look at the CSS as well. And then in between this button, there is a font awesome icon for a floppy disk. If I comment out this, let's comment out this. See, this floppy disk should go away. You can see floppy disk is gone. I can put text here. I can say submit. You can use text, right? See, submit. That is the button. That's the submit button using a text. But you can as well use an icon to do that, or use the two, both the icon and the text, whichever one. So, but let me take away this. Then what next? Still inside the form, there is a particular article or another section of this form. Now you can't see there is no content here, just as there is no content here. You know, logically content should come here. Look, let me add this. You see something now. Okay, well, it is turned off by default. Let's see. Let's go back to our CSS. Let's open CSS. Week 8. I'm in the starter folder, style.css. Now look at this. Let's come back here. Let's quickly look at this one. See, the class name is called what? Entry container, right? That means this is the container that should take all those entries. Let's demo it here again. Let's add other books here. So let's examine the source code. Now look at this source code. This is main going down. This is the alert, which is empty for now. This is the container, h1 header. This is the form. Go down again. Now this is the blank, or which was blank in the source code, but here it has been generated dynamically. There is now content, dynamic content here. You know, so the what we want to achieve is JavaScript should dynamically populate this content here, this entry, this book title, all these icons and everything. But by default, when the page loads, I'm hiding that container. Look at, it's called where is it? So yeah, entry container. Let's look for entry container in the CSS. Let's go to the CSS. Look at entry container. Visibility is what? Hidden. Let me comment out this. See what will happen here. See, look at the gibberish I typed here. The gibberish I typed here. See all this. See, so it's appearing here. Look at them here. But what we want to achieve is when this page loads, it should be hidden. This whole container should be hidden. So use the visibility property. See, just simple. Visibility is what is hidden. At some point, you can see I'm turning it again to visible. Although I'm using a different class name, I'm applying these classes dynamically. Show entry container. This makes it visible when you add this class dynamically to your page. And we're going to demo all this later on. So it is hidden. Once it loads, you can't see anything. You only see something if there is content in the page. Let me go back here. Yes, of course. So since there is content in the page, it's going to unhide or show that container and then show the content of your database. So take note of that. All right, so let's come back to our JavaScript again. So the first thing we want to do, oh no, we're examining this. So this is very crucial. This is empty at this point because we want to dynamically populate this container that houses or that encloses all those book items. And then there is a clear all button as well. You can see it's also hidden. There is no clear all button here. If you go back to the style again, clear all, look at clear all. Visibility is what? Is hidden. If I unhide it, if I comment this out, see, you can see clear all has appeared with all the formatting and everything. This whole, look at this whole CSS class, this whole property is being controlled just by this hidden or by this visibility rule or attribute or property. That means this whole rule applies to this class, or this same rule rather. this visibility applies to this class, not any other class. Once you apply this, it disappears. Or once you take it away, it appears again in the front. So we want to now use JavaScript to control this disappearing and reappearing as you code as you go along in the code. So back again to the default value. So that's basically the HTML, very simple HTML. Container, a header tag, a form that contains a text box, a button, an empty container, and then a clear all button at this point. So let's start manipulating the JavaScript, the DOM elements. So the first thing we want to do is to, of course, let's do const time is 5 minutes to the end of this class, but let's just see what we can do. So const, we can start with the alert. Remember, you must always consult. So alert is here. So again, because this has just a class attribute, so I can use the class selector or query selector to select that particular class. So I can name it alert equals, again, document is the root. Document dot what? Query selector, and then in a quote dot the name of the what? Of the class. Look at it again. The class name is what? Alert, right? And if I'm wondering, all these properties, like let me add another, in case I'm wondering where are all this blue color, the text and everything coming from, they are already in the CSS, even though it is empty here, but this class exists in the CSS. Let's go back again. CSS, let's find alert. See, margin bottom, margin top, there's alert danger, this is the danger color, there's alert success. So all these properties, all these CSS classes are already existing in the CSS. So we just want to control them dynamically from our JavaScript. So now we've gotten our alert. Let's also get our form element itself, the form, this element, and the name is class or library form. That is the class name we've given to it. Let me just duplicate this. Query selector, library form. Assuming I can widen my screen. I would have just done. Okay, let me do this. I want us to see all this well. Or let me reduce the size. Let's come back. Reduce the width of this main. You can see my width is 64. Let's take it down to 30. You can see? Just simple. Or let's do 35. So I reduced that from the CSS because this is the main, this is the class controlling this whole part, this main. Everything here is this section here. So I'm just reducing the width so that I can do this and then open, or let me open my HTML at the bottom here so I can see. Hope you can still see what I'm doing. So this is JavaScript and this is HTML, and then our output is here. So let's name it form. Let's call it, or library form. Let's say library form. I want to follow what I've done. Library, which is logical because the name of the selector is library form. So library form. Remember, in JavaScript you use your camel notation. We use, somebody say, why did I use main instead of div? You can use div. Div will also work. See, div will also work here. If I use, so I put div here. I just want to follow semantic HTML. See, make sure div has closed it. Div, and see, our page is still working correctly. But semantically, I just want to say this is like the main section of my web page. So I've undone that, back to main. So you can use div here, you can use section, you can even use section, right? Yeah, time is up, but let's quickly demo this. Library form, I've added library form, I've added, in fact, you know what, let me just, maybe because of time, let me just copy all this out since I've implemented them already. So we'll just explain. So basic things, get query, get element by ID that we talked about. So I'm getting the alert field, this alert, this one, this paragraph element. I'm getting that particular object. Library form, this whole form here, this entire object, I'm getting that. That's what line 2 gives to us. Input title is okay, let me give it a okay, I name the title. Input title is this. I'm doing get element by ID title. See, title. So this gives us this input element. So input title gives us the input element. And then entry container. Okay. Entry container. See? Entry container. I'm using the class name entry container here to get this particular article. This can also be a section. It can be div. It can be anything. So take note of that. So this gives us that particular object. Button save. I named it button save. Look at ID is what? Button save. This particular button has an ID, button save. And then button clear all. Button clear all. Look at this clear all button, which is just a div. I named it clear all. I'm using the query selector to select it, and the name is what? Clear all, right? So somebody's saying the pop-up information we see when the task is performed, is it as a result of CSS? The pop-up, you mean this one? Or when we type? No, that one, those are just enhancements on the ID. They are just enhancements. So just to make the ID, make your, just to give you good experience, you can go to the reference documentation and all. So that's that. Or maybe you meant when you're typing, if I say button, this kind of pop-ups, these are auto completion. I mean, on the book library interface here, okay, these ones are they are browser implementation, because I've typed. If I do book now, let me see, what have I typed before? Anything you've typed before, Chrome tries to save it so that you don't have to repeat yourself again. Let me see. Oh, of course, this is not yet working. But here for this one, if I do book, so all these items I've typed before. So you don't have to do anything to achieve this. You don't have to use CSS or JavaScript. They are browser implementations. So because I've typed all this before, the browser just gives me access to all of them, and of which you can use JavaScript to even clear. If you don't want this particular effect on your form, we can use JavaScript to clear it off so that it doesn't happen. So I mean the highlights that eventually disappear. Oh, that, of course, that one is JavaScript. That is JavaScript. It's just your timer. I'm setting a timer. There's a function called set time out to 3 seconds, so it disappears after. All right. I'm looking at the time. This is 4:04. I believe we need to end this class now. Somebody's saying, but can we use ID or class when defining the const? Oh, yeah, you can use ID or anything. Const is just for maintain immutability, right? Const means that this field is going to be constant. You are not reassigning anything. You are not changing the value. But any value you modify, for example, we are going to be modifying at some points. Let me paste this here. I'm going to be modifying entry title, edit flag, entry title ID. You can see I'm using let here. Let. so not const. So yeah, unfortunately we have to end the class now. This is 405. Next week by God's grace, we're gonna, this will be the first thing we're gonna start with. In fact, this is the only thing. So next week we're gonna continue the implementation of this so that you can um, have a better understanding of how to manipulate your document objects within your browser. So yeah, time is up. This is 406 or 405 my time. Just to recap, use query selector or get element by ID or get element by name to select those elements from your browser, assign them to variables, and then you can now start manipulating them. Yeah, deadline for the main project is next week Saturday. So you had like 2 weeks and 3 days or so to work on the project. So next Saturday will be the deadline of the project. All right, thank you very much, guys. Sorry we couldn't really go far on today's project, but next week I'm also very interested in this project. Next week we're gonna start working from here. Somebody saying this is very interesting but technical. Yes, it's interesting. You can see we are beginning to enjoy JavaScript now. But it's technical. Yeah, I'll try my best to break it down to try to explain every part of the code so you can understand. Yep, very useful. All right, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for coming. Keep working on your projects. If you have questions, please do well to ask your questions using the not GitHub, using the Discord community. A lot of actions taking place already. So next week we're gonna try to complete, at least take it to an appreciable level. We should be able to do next week. Let's implement the deletes or the creating the entries, and then creating the entries, deleting, and then updating. So we have codes to write. So but yeah, we should be able to at least handle one of these within 2 hours. So because it's already persisted in the database, if I go to, so on Firefox you go to storage, you see local storage, but on Chrome it's under application. So Firefox is under storage, Chrome is under application. So if you double click on this, you can see I used a list object to save all these items. If you click on it, so there's an array of 3 items. Chrome shows it better. So if you view, it's being persisted already. On Chrome, you go to application, under storage, click on this. Then this is the list. So you can see that these are the 3 items. 1, 2, 3. So these are the values. ID, the title, ID, title for these 3 items. Yeah, we'll talk about all this next week. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. See you guys next week Saturday.